It's great to be here in front of this group, which I know have been here several times before, and I know where you folks, what you care about in your states, and it's time for the federal government to do its part in the process. But let me just start off, first I'll get to the infrastructure package, but let me start off with something that's near and dear to my heart, and I guess I'm going to get it off my chest, but my FAA bill, which we realized yesterday we weren't going to be able to move it on the House floor. And I have absolutely no regrets in the policy trying to take the Air Traffic Control Organization out of government, like 60 industrialized modern nations in the world have done. I think the policy is absolutely right from the top of my head to the tip of my toes. I believe it's the absolute right policy moving forward. My biggest disappointment is that it was my party, the Republican Party, the party of smaller government, reducing costs, trying to be more efficient in government, innovation. It was my party and members of my party that stopped us from moving this forward. So I'm going to put that in the rearview mirror, good transportation term. And I talked to Senator Thune yesterday. He and I are going to try to work together, House and Senate, to move an FAA reauthorization bill here before the end of the August recess, hopefully. So that's the plan. But we're going to work closely together to put something together that can pass both the House and Senate and make it down to the White House. And it's something that it's a must-pass bill. It expires March 31st, and if we don't extend it, at least temporarily, a short-term extension, then we stop operations for the FAA, and that we certainly can't have it. It's too important to the economy of the United States, too important to all of your states and the people, the traveling public, the 850 million or so people that fly every year around this country. So again, Senator Thune and I are going to work towards a reform bill, not as big as I had hoped, but something that will be positive and keep the system moving forward in a positive and hopefully more innovative way. So there, I got that off my chest. Second smaller bill, which could be part of a larger package, is a water resources bill. We've been successful in the last two Congresses to move a water resources bill forward. One of my goals when I first came to be chairman was we hadn't moved a water resources bill in 7 years, and historically, previous 30 years or so, every Congress needs to authorize these projects at the Corps and the states, and they're important to the inland waterways, the ports, the harbors, environmental restoration, flood control. So again, we've got that back on track. We're starting to already work that legislation, and we will pass that this year, whether it's a bigger package or it's just a word bill, one way or the other, and we'll do that. We need to keep reforming the Corps, and I like to ask this question to a group like you, and I want to see a show of hands. How many people, how many states, or those of you in the room, have either had a project or working on a project or trying to do a project that the Corps of Engineers has been a major stumbling block for you to move forward? Now, if everybody doesn't raise their hand in here, you're not in the business of building things. And so I just want to let you know, we've got a new assistant secretary. From the first time I met with President Trump, I said, one of the most important appointments you can make is the assistant secretary of the Army for Civil Works. That's the Corps of Engineers. And yesterday we had the new secretary. He's been there on 12 days, so we couldn't beat him up too much. But we had the senior leadership, military leadership there, and we had the senior members of the House Transportation Committee, and we were very frank and forward saying, this cannot go on. It can't take 15, 17 years to put these projects forward. And again, when you're doing roads or your bridges or you name the project out there, whether it's a development, and we got a president who's had problems with the Corps of Engineers over his years building buildings, this has to stop, because it is a huge hurdle for us. It's a stumbling block. So again, that's something that's going to be very, very high on our list. Now, what you came to hear me say is what you heard Governor, Senator Carper talking about, and that's the infrastructure package. I got to tell you, I was very encouraged, and I am very encouraged, that we have a president of the United States that has not just started talking about infrastructure. On the day he was sworn in on his inaugural address, he uttered the word infrastructure. And I got my staff to look back over history, and they can't find a president that said the word infrastructure. I think Lincoln talked about internal improvements, that's infrastructure. So again, it's very encouraging to have a president that's talking about it. a president who understands it. Again, he's built projects and he knows what it's like to come in on time, under budget. He knows the challenges you face with the environmental regulations, the government regulations you face out there. So that's all very positive. He put out a package, a big package. There was some really great stuff in it. Some of the stuff that he put in, some of the things they put in, I'm not so sure it's going anywhere. And I've been very frank with he and his team to let him know that some of it's good. It's a great thing to start discussing, great point to discuss. But for me, as I expressed to the president and as I talk to everybody, there's three things that has to be in an infrastructure package. First and foremost, it has to be bipartisan. You got to get 60 votes in the Senate if you're going to pass something over there in an infrastructure bill. And on the House side, I want to attract Democrats. If I attract Democrats in an infrastructure bill, I will lose Republicans because there'll be something in there that, 20, 30, 50, 60 Republicans will say, no, I'm not going to vote for that. So it has to start off. We have to begin the process in a bipartisan way. I heard you talked to Peter DeFazio earlier this morning. Peter and I have already started the discussion. I want to work with him hand in glove to put something forward that he can attract Democrats, I can attract Republicans, and we can come out with a bipartisan proposal in the House. So first, it has to be bipartisan. There's no way around that. It has to be realistic. When I say realistic, it has to be paid for. As a conservative Republican, to be fiscally responsible, we need to pay for it. And how we do that, that's the big discussion of debate by some of us. Some of us don't want to talk about it. It has to be balanced. And the needs, and to attract my Democrat friends, they want to see the trust fund fixed, as do I want to see the trust fund fixed. So it has to be realistic, and of course it has to be, I believe, leaning forward, streamlining. There's some other process proposals out there we can reduce, eliminate. The president's talked about getting it down to 2 years. Those are the kinds of things that we need to lean forward on and look to the future. What are the things out there that we need to look at? But of course, also forward-leaning is how do we pay for this? Long-term, 10, 20 years out, the highway trust fund, or excuse me, what we pay at the pump, the user fee that we pay at the pump is not sustainable. But in the short term, there's a lot of different ideas out there. I know Peter has I believe it's penny for progress, dealing with bonding and taking a penny and using it that way. Not opposed to it. But when you look at the options we have out there, one that's understandable to, I think, the American people, more importantly, has to be understandable to members of Congress, is what we pay at the pump. We haven't touched it for 25 years. And when I say it has to be understandable is Republicans will wince when you talk about the fee at the pump, the gas tax, so-called gas tax. But it is understandable for people. And if you bring a new process into play, trying to explain, oh, this is a new way to collect the fees or a new way to do this, it becomes very, very difficult to move something, especially in the short time frame that we have. So when it comes down to it, it's the easiest thing. It's not easy. It's the easiest thing to understand, but it's very difficult to move something on increasing that. And I think a couple of folks have already been in here today talking about the meeting we had a week or two ago. Senator Brasso, Carper, and Peter DeFazio and I were in the room, and the president threw out 25 cents a gallon at the pump. And the president, we talked about it, had a nice discussion. The president then turned to us and said, the Democrats, you can blame us. You can blame me for doing it. And I said, Mr. President, they're not going to blame you. They're going to embrace you. It's going to be Republicans that push back on it. And again, it's a user fee. And as a conservative Republican, I believe if you use something, you ought to pay for it. And again, we haven't touched this in 25 years. So having the president out there, which I expressed to him, this has to be presidential leadership. The president has to be out there on a weekly basis talking about it, going around the country. How do we pay for this? He proposed 25 cents. That gets you somewhere in the vicinity of $400 billion over 10 years, which is double what their proposal was on funding it. And in their plan, they did not have a pay for. So again, it's something that I think that it's out there. The president's talking about it, and that's important to do. As we move forward, again, figuring out how to pay for it, which is critical. we need to build upon the success of MAP 21 and the FAST Act. There's lots of reforms we had in both those bills. About half of them have been implemented. Secretary Chow and her team, she's just starting to get her team on board. It's been a year, so she's been shorthanded over there. But they have been moving faster and getting some of these things implemented that'll give you, the states, more flexibility. Hopefully decrease the red tape that you have to go through to get these projects moving forward. And that being said, on how we pay for it as we move forward, I know it came in at the end of Senator Carper's remarks talking about vehicle miles traveled. I hear that every single day. I don't believe that's ready for prime time. I've got folks on the left and the right saying you're not going to put a tracker on my vehicle. Although, as I tell it to my 26-year-old son, he pulls out his iPhone and says, they can find me anywhere I want to find me. So I believe it's a generational thing. So if we do something that's a shorter-term fix, I think as the next generation comes into Congress and the next generation of people, as the generation sort of leadership in this country, we've got to move to something like that, figuring out how to protect people's privacy, but keeping it simple, because it is very simple how we collect it. I shouldn't say simple, it's efficient. About 1,100 entities collect it. I know my state of Pennsylvania back in 2013 took it off the pump and put it on a barrel of oil. If we did that at the national level, it'd take you down to less than 100 entities that would be collecting it. So we've got to keep it efficient. People talking about putting it on your tax bill, that would be a nightmare. That's 320 million people. We'd have to figure out, did you pay your fair share? Did you pay what you needed to pay? So again, I don't think it's ready for prime time. Electric vehicles pay zero. Well, they pay less than zero because we give them a $6,500 credit to buy an electric vehicle. I know my state of Pennsylvania, I think, still gives another $1,500 and various. So we got people riding around out there getting thousands of dollars and reduced cost to buy an electric vehicle, and then pay zero to ride on the roads, and that has to change. They've got to pay their fair share. So again, I'm looking at this in a positive way. I know that Senator Cornyn put out a statement today saying that the Senate wouldn't have the time to do an infrastructure bill. I don't begin to try to understand how the Senate works. But I know of a couple of things we have to pass: appropriations bills to fund the government, and I believe our timeline is the 23rd, so I think that'll get done. We have to pass an FAA bill. Other than that, I don't know what they're going to be doing over there in the Senate. Same in the House. I mean, I know we're running for election, but I think it's important, and that's why I'm committed with Peter DeFazio to put out a plan to start the conversation. May not pass it before September, before the August recess, but at least start the conversation, and then maybe we can pass it before August recess. Hopefully we can. If not, everybody takes out their knives and the political knives in September and October, and we'll be just cutting each other up. But I think there's also an opportunity, and this is probably going to make it in the press when I say this. It could be a lame duck strategy, that we do it after the election. And if we don't deal with it now, the trust fund runs out of money in October of 2020. I don't know how in the world we do it next year, depending on what happens to Congress. Republicans remain in control, not in control. The president's going to be moving towards an election. And again, for those of you in the room that aren't familiar with the calendar of elections, October of 2020 is a month before the general election for the presidency. So it's something I think we have to get done. I would encourage all of you to continue. I heard Senator Carper again say, get out there, talk to your members of Congress, especially your Republican members of Congress. They have to understand we have to pay for this. It is fiscally responsible for us to do it in a way that we pay for it. And as a conservative, the user fee, as I mentioned earlier, that's the way to do it. You use it, you pay for it. Along with getting streamlining and other things out there that we can attract some of my most conservative friends to passing a bill. So again, I really appreciate you being here in Washington. I appreciate the support you've given me, the guidance you've given me. Bud and Jim Timon. Timon had the dubious honor, or not honor, but had to work for me for a couple of years. He's one of the best. Your organization, of course, is you're the experts on the issue. So getting in to see your members of Congress, and as I tell the road builders and the consulting engineers, the aggregate folks, and I'll say this to you, when you come to see a member of Congress, you're best served by bringing in a manufacturer or your manufacturers, a big trucking company, people that actually use the system that can sit down with a Republican and explain to them, if it takes me an hour longer to get the product or the goods to where they're going, it costs me more money. The American people are paying for this already in the products and the services they have because of the congestion that's out there, because of the rough shape the roads are in. So again, I would encourage you when you're going to members of Congress, bring that manufacturing base from your state, bring that the transportation industry from your state, and talk to members of Congress, especially Republican members of Congress, because that seems to where we have our biggest challenge and figure out the funding of this very, very important legislation. So again, thank you all very much. It was mentioned, this is my last year as chairman. We as Republicans, we term limit ourselves. A lot of people have said, well, why don't you try to get a waiver? I'm the last guy that would go for a waiver, because my father didn't run for Congress again, and I got to run for Congress. Don Young and John Mica termed out, and so lo and behold, I get to be the chairman. So I'm the last guy. I think it's good for Congress that we bring fresh blood in, but I made the decision at the beginning of the year, or at the end of last year, that this is my last year. I've got a president who's focused on infrastructure, and that's all I want to be focused on for the next 300 or so days that I have left, and working to try to pass an infrastructure bill to hopefully get something done that we can rebuild our nation, and the federal government does its fair share, its role in the rebuilding of the infrastructure of this country. So again, thank you all very much, and I'll be seeing and hearing from you at least for about 300 or so days. Thank you.